I'm watching some horrible footage on the news about, I think it's the Rohingya crisis. Maybe not. Guys, they're throwing food off. I don't know where this is. I'm not sure where it is. I think it is, yeah. Old Aung San Suu Kyi, she really kept up her side of the bargain when it comes to human rights, didn't she? It's alright, you're whinging away about equality and all the rest of it until it's not her people getting anally raped. In fact, it's her people doing the jettisoning of a whole bunch of people from the country. Brilliant. So, yeah, you can just imagine all the same stuff going down. Probably calling them cockroaches in Myanmar, it's the usual one. Calling them cockroaches. I heard Ted Nugent, that's what he calls liberals, cockroaches. I got that from the Rwanda, Hotel Rwanda. There's a guy on the radio, that's what he was calling the Tutsis. He was calling them cockroaches. Katie Hopkins called the migrants coming over the Mediterranean, called them cockroaches. And I heard an interesting thing. Actually, that Jordan Peterson guy, the professor, and it goes back to tribalism again, that back in the day, in our hunter-gatherer days, when we met a new tribe, there was a chance we might have contracted contagions from them and died. Or they're also in competition for food and all the rest of it. But what happens with Hitler and all them types, they're severe bigots, is they feel disgust towards the other tribe. Because that's what Hitler, Jews were a tribe, the Germans were a tribe, it was all tribes, isn't it? And they sort of liked the British because they were kind of German, part of the tribe, but not the real tribe. And they didn't like they just liked their tribe and hated this other tribe that was living amongst them and wanted to kick them out. And that's exactly what is going on in Myanmar right now. Exact same thing. But it actually physiologically creates a feeling of disgust amongst certain people when they're talking about other tribes. And he thinks it might be evolutionary based. But it's all tribalism, that's for sure. You can see it everywhere. Left wing, right wing, that's all tribe. That's why a lot of left wing people say lots of stupid stuff. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's because the right wing says the opposite. So whatever the right wing says, the left wing have to disagree. Because they have to go along with their tribe, their people, no matter what. Which is why the left wing, it sounds idiotic a lot of times, unfortunately. And right wing, I think, the left wing are idiotic about ignoring the ethnocentrism of human beings and thinking that doesn't exist, in the same way that the right wing are idiotic about ignoring the sexuality of human beings. That's both their Achilles heels. Yeah? The left wing refuse to admit that people are ethnocentric, even though they are themselves, especially the middle class and upper class ones. They always live amongst people who are basically the same as them. Even if they're maybe not the same ethnic background, they'll certainly act and behave and fit in totally, or else they get frozen out. And then the right wing, if you're gay or whatever the hell it is, or not a good moralizing person, then you don't get to fit in with them either. So, in the old days, those types were in ascendancy. The right wing, sexually prudish types, and that for the most part, that type of moral system is in place in most of the world. But ever since the 60s in the West, that moral paradigm has shifted to one where the moral paradigm is about ethnicity and identity. And that's why we're having, but it's a lot more. Sexuality and ethnicity is very different though, because men and women always sort of need each other. Yeah? You know, you can't, you know, there's just not, we're not going to really separate. You know, when it comes down to it, women aren't going to kick all the men out and men aren't going to kick all the women out. But if different ethnicities will do that. And we're watching it happen right now in Myanmar. So I think that I've noticed, and I read Margaret Mead's book, who is an ethnologist. I can't remember the name for a cultural anthropologist. She spent time in Papua New Guinea and she was studying the different tribes there. And she said all the tribes had taboos. It seems to be built into the human psyche, the taboo, which is actually a Polynesian word. And it was like certain foods were taboo in Polynesia, and that's where we get the word taboo. And of course we have taboo foods, like a dog. And obviously pork for certain religions. The main one that everyone's terrified about, Judaism. The other one, I forget this name, begins with an I. But anyway, they have taboos. They also have taboos on modesty and sexuality. Those are the main ones. But the West doesn't have those taboos anymore since the 60s, since free love. Yeah? People have sex before marriage all the time. People lose their virginity all the time. We have the pill. But societies always seem to have the collective psyche of a culture seems to need taboos. And our taboo is ethnicity or identity. It doesn't even have to be ethnicity, although that's probably, it doesn't have to be. You know, it can even be, yeah, so that's the big one. And maybe it's just hardwired into the human brain. Another thing I've noticed about humans is they always are fighting. Always. About anything. Yeah. There's not, I mean, they just can't, maybe that's part of life, you know, like, bacteria break off, yeah, into two different parts. You get one cell, it breaks out. Maybe you get one humanity, they break off. They always break off into two groups. Even happened in Islam, didn't it? Had Muhammad, the perfect being, came along. Within 3 generations, that broke off into two. Right? You got the Sunnis and the Shias from that. I mean, the Christianity, we already had the Coptic Church and the Maronites and the Roman Catholic Church. And that kept the Roman Catholic, and then you had the Eastern Orthodox Church, so that already had broken up. Yeah, but it just seems to happen, you know. You get a gang together and then some guys challenging the Pope or the gang leader or the Godfather, the Mafia Don or the Pope, same thing. And then a young upcoming guy will go off and form his own gang, and then they'll have a war, and it's just, I don't know, it's just the way it is. Happens in bands too, I guess. Let's think of a band where that happened. Pink Floyd, kinda. You had Syd Barrett, he was the leader, and his second in command, Roger Waters. Syd Barrett went mental. David Gilmour came along, and Roger Waters felt threatened. His position, even though they were very, you know, obviously complemented each other a lot. But basically it came down to 2 alpha males trying to compete. So if you see, he would be the dominant male in that band. Sure as hell wasn't Richard Wright, let's be honest. Beatles, same thing. Paul and John. John was older, but then again, Paul was the older brother in his family, so he's had a bossy element to him as well. Yeah, it's very interesting, the power dynamics. Maybe I'll talk about that next. Of these groups of men. I want to talk about that. The Top Gear, the Rat Pack, the Beatles. Just, maybe I'll talk about it in the next thing. Yeah, well, I'm going to do it. I'll talk in 31